Hi, Michael. How are you?
Good, good. Nice to see some sunshine again after the horrible rain we've had the last couple of days.
Oh, brilliant. I can't say we're quite as lucky. It's still a bit freezing in Melbourne, but all
Yeah.
good. What I thought we'd have a chat about today is something that often comes up is accountants are usually the first port of call for most of their clients. If there's any sort of stress or any financial pressure or anything's not going quite right, people will turn to their accountant, or accountants also see it a lot of the time first. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is why you? Why should we use Tax Assure? How can Tax Assure help us in a way that's different to our accountant? When they're our trusted advisor, we've known them for years. What can you do to assist my business or work with the accountant to get us the best outcome?
Yeah, look, and it's the same. It's a question we get a lot. And I think the really simple answer to this is you can go into a lot of other detail, but the simple answer is what we do isn't accounting work. It's actually dealing with debt collectors and negotiating with debt collectors. And, I've got law degrees and accounting degrees and I've been a litigation lawyer for many, many years. And, worked for sort of big four in both of those areas. But there's nothing in there that taught me around either through study or through practice about dealing with debt collectors. So, I often feel, for accountants in having to do this because people go, oh, it's ATO, therefore my accountant must be able to help me with this. And look, some do it sort of quite well, but at the end of the day, as I said, it's not accounting work, and I think a lot of accountants get frustrated with having to deal with this work.
Yeah, I also say it's very specialised work. I don't know how to lodge my own BAS. I don't give any advice around tax compliance. That's not in my skill set. But similar to you, I was a commercial litigator for 16 years and I did a lot of negotiation. And often you say, for want of a better term, it's the devil you know. So we know what the ATO are looking for. We understand that they've got legal practice requirements of what they can take into consideration and what they can't. So when we're writing detailed submissions, that incorporate those legal practice requirements. It's absolutely within our skill set and our knowledge. And because it's all we do, all day, every day, we're just dealing with the ATO debt department. We've become very specialised in what we should do. And I think it's difficult, as you said, to put that pressure on accountants, especially when a client's been non-compliant on and off, or they've got very big debt and it's not what we would necessarily say is an easy run-of-the-mill matter. Accountants have so much else on their plate and such a huge skill set. To then expect them to have the same skill set when this is all we do is actually quite a tall task.
Yeah, look, and I think you made a comment too before about the fact that accountants have long-term relationships with clients, and I think often it actually is very helpful to have somebody fresh come in because as you well know that clients have a lot going on in their lives as well, and they'll often tell us things they may not be comfortable sharing with their accountant who have that long-term relationship, and that's stuff that's often the stuff that's really helpful in terms of getting the outcomes that we want. So, I think the other sort of factor around this, and we get about, as you know, around about 35% of our work from the accounting profession because they recognise that this is sort of an area that isn't accounting work, but we're finding more and more that we're getting calls, and certainly I am, from accountants saying, look, in the past we were able to deal with this and we were able to get the outcomes that we wanted, but as we both know, there's I guess the environment or the landscape has changed significantly from now as it was even pre-COVID, where the ATO was still sort of pushing fairly hard against business to try and get debt in, but now it's to a whole new level, and I think that's driven largely from the fact that prior to COVID there was around $23 billion of uncontested tax debt. Now it's over 60 billion, and so there's a lot of pressure on the commissioner to get that debt in and get taxpayers compliant. And so, almost every day I'm getting a call from an accountant to say, look, we would normally manage this, but unfortunately, we can't because we're not getting those outcomes. And I had exactly that came in last week with a Queensland client who, again, had very good firm, very good accountant. They managed the client's position with the ATO for around about 18 months and been able to sort of keep the ATO happy, getting some payments through. They'd had some payment plans, but they defaulted. But they'd reached a point with the ATO where they were saying, enough, we now need to get this into a long-term compliant arrangement. And they were putting on parameters around what that would need to look at that the client simply couldn't meet. And so it was looking very much like it was going to go, I guess, pear-shaped, and that things were going to become very difficult for the business and its directors. But good thing is they knew us. We've worked with the firm for many, many years, and they said, look, I think this is one where we need your help. We need your specialist help, as you say. We managed to stop any recovery action, get them into a long-term payment plan, and get around sort of $300,000 or $400,000 in interest. I think it was about $380,000 in interest remitted off a $2 million debt, which made a huge, huge difference to the client and their business.
I think too, when you talk about pressure on the ATO collecting, I think there's also a lot of pressure on accountants with staff
Yeah,
shortages
definitely.
and what their clients are asking them to do, all the increased things that had to be done over COVID with grants and JobKeeper and the flow-on effect from that, and retaining staff. Again, you've got the working from home issues. So you've got all of these issues on accountants as a business, and then now a whole heap of their clients are not in a position of tax compliance. So they've got the additional job and additional stress of spending hours on the phone, often up to 2 hours at a time. Their staff hate often dealing with the debt side of it. Their staff would rather stick with their core work and their skill set, which is doing the advisory work and the compliance work, and the amount of time it can then take up while they're spending 2 hours on the phone. And I often get told they're hoping that they get a friendly that answers the phone rather than a specified application meeting this criteria that gives them a yes and gives them the outcome they need. And as you know, one of the really significant issues is if they keep ringing and hanging up and ringing again, which some people tell me that's their strategy, that it's actually affecting a client's risk rating, and it's affecting how the client's compliance record of what happens for that particular client.
Yeah, and it's funny, I had exactly that situation a few days ago where that we had a client that came in from it was a Western Sydney accounting firm. It was a construction company. They had a significant debt with the ATO, and again, they'd done a pretty good job in terms of managing it through COVID. And it was your classic trifecta from COVID. They were affected by lockdowns. They were affected by supply chain issues and staffing issues and so forth. So. Good quality business, good future, but a significant, $3 million debt, which was threatening their viability. And interestingly, the client had taken over the negotiations with the ATO themselves. They had an experienced CPA who dealt with the ATO for many years. But we were brought in because they just hadn't got the thing across the line, and we were asked to review what had been done. As soon as we saw what had been lodged, and we were seeing that the ATO were coming back with request after request after request for more information, I said, look, guys, this looks very much like to me that the ATO are doing two things. They're not happy with your application. They're not happy with, in terms of your capacity to pay, viability of the business. They're not convinced. And it looks like they're starting to get their ducks in a row to look at legal recovery action. Luckily, they did engage us and we spoke to the ATO, and that was exactly the case because and we were able to withdraw the application before that happened because, again, had that application been refused, as you said, then that would have created another default on their account, and legal recovery action was 5 minutes away. Good news is, again, we were able to withdraw that application, get something in the ATO could approve, because, again, this is highly specialised, and it's in terms of getting something in that it's not just a question of putting anything in, but putting something that meets the legal requirements so that they can actually, it's, as we call it, capable of being approved. It's been approved. Again, we've got them into a long-term sustainable arrangement, significant reduction of interest and penalties, and the client's getting on with business.
I often sometimes describe ourselves, it's a little bit like when you're talking about GPs and a specialist. Again, what you said about this, it's a really specialised application. So your accountant is like your GP. You see them regularly, your general health, your compliance. But when something goes wrong, so like if you've got a smash knee, your GP is going to refer you to an absolute specialist, a gun surgeon that's going to fix your knee. You get on with running your marathon, and hopefully you never need to see the surgeon again. And you continue on seeing the GP, and your GP is your hero because they've given you an amazing specialist. That's a bit like us. The accountant you're seeing for everyday compliance, or your general needs. But if you need a specialist to come in, fix that particular issue so you can get on with running your business, and continue on, and hopefully you don't need to see us again, then you still think the GP and the accountant are your hero because they've referred you to an amazing specialist that's been able to get a very, very unique problem solved, that rather than looking after the general health of the business or the general health of the body.
Nice, yeah. And look, that raises a really interesting point. And certainly one of the things, because I often ask, the accountants why they've come to us. What is it that about this client you want help with? And to sort of use your analogy around the sort of specialists and everything is often it's client risk. And so it's, again, if you're using your analogy, if you go to your GP and you're getting nowhere, you start to think your GP is not a very good GP, when really what they should have done is referred you on to a specialist and they fix it. And then you still think you've got a good GP. And it's the same with this. Often clients, particularly if they've got an existing relationship and their accountant has been able to get them across the line to date, they fully expect that to continue. And sometimes it's just not possible. And so it's around bringing the specialist in to do two things: to get the best possible outcome and keep the client viable and functioning, but also to be able to take that heat and say, look, guys, no, this is what you need to do here now. And these are the parameters within the ATO. And then that keeps the relationship with the accountant and the client clean in that area.
Yeah, I think too. So a number of discussions I've had are like, well, anyone can get a payment plan. And an example of that is I spoke to the wife of a diesel mechanic, and he had an $80,000 tax debt. They'd got warning letters, they'd got recovery letters from the ATO. So she went onto the ATO portal, and what she kept doing is upping the amount of the payment plan until the computer or the portal accepted the plan. So in some instances, you might say, yes, if you throw enough money at the proposal, anyone can get a payment plan, but they're not the best payment plan. They're not viable, and they're going to default because clients can't afford them. So it is about getting the absolute best plan that the clients can afford, and knowing, as you said, what can be accepted by the ATO to get the client in a viable and compliant position to move forward. And whether often that doesn't include an upfront. This particular client, the plan that the wife had arranged was $8,000 a fortnight and 20% upfront, which is huge. We would never agree to such a plan, ever. And the relief in her voice when I said, no, we can probably quarter that for you. And she was so panicked because she just needed to get a plan. But it's not always just about a plan. It's about the best possible plan, about the best possible outcome to keep clients running their business, to keep them viable and to keep them in a compliant position.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the other sort of part of that transaction is the removal of the interest and penalties. As you know,
Yeah,
you get one crack at it. So if you do it and you do it poorly and you get a refusal, then the only really avenue you have is to go to the federal court and challenge the decision. So that's, again, often why a lot of people, particularly work that's coming from an accounting firm, will say, well, look, we might normally do this, but either because of the circumstances or the size of the interest that's on the account, they are often hesitant to do that, and again, get some specialist help with that.
And that's significant because the interest and penalties at the moment, they're over 10.5% compounded daily. So if we're able to reduce the debt, that's a huge amount that can be taken off, which then allows the payment plan to have lower repayments over a longer period of time, again, reducing the stress, again, keeping people viable so they can get on with running their business.
I guess that question we often get is, why you? Isn't this what my accountant does? And I think the answer is, well, no, it's not, because it's not accounting work, it's debt collection work, and it's more akin to legal work. And that's why, we work hand in hand with accountants as part of their sort of extended team in terms of, helping their clients get the best outcomes with the ATO debt area and stay viable and in business.
I often describe it as working parallel. So we work in our lane, helping them manage the debt and get the debt in a compliant position. The accountants, while we're doing that, are working in the compliance lane to get all the lodgements up to date, to make sure everything's lodged on time and all the returns are done. And then sometimes you might even add a broker into the mix if there's finance. But I think it's super important that everyone's working in their lanes to all get to a common goal at the end, not in competition, but absolutely hand in hand.
Yeah, and it's probably worth noting. We don't do tax advice work, we don't do tax compliance work, we don't do tax dispute work. We purely deal with undisputed ATO debt and getting the best outcomes, working with our clients' other advisors.
Absolutely.